I had been with Atlas Bank for 25 years. This morning was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone in a career built on late nights, impossible deadlines, and the kind of loyalty you can't buy. I had even rehearsed a short speech for the staff. But instead of stepping up to the podium, I was called into a glass-walled conference room that felt colder than the Chicago winter outside. The CEO was already there, a folder in front of him like a weapon. He didn't smile, didn't even bother with small talk, just slid the paper across the table and said, "Effective immediately. No warning, no thank you, just gone." For a second, I thought it was a mistake. I looked at the letter, my name, the date, the reason, strategic restructuring. But I knew the truth. This was about the $3 million they didn't want to pay me in pension. 25 years reduced to a single sheet of paper. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just picked up my bag, swiped my badge one last time, and walked out without looking back. But the thing is, they had no idea what my silence really meant. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you watching from? And let me ask you, have you ever had someone underestimate you so badly they forgot you were the one holding the key? Leave a comment if this brings something to mind. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs today. I didn't say a word. Not when Gavin slid that letter toward me. Not when he leaned back in his chair, clearly expecting me to beg for my job, or at least demand an explanation. I just folded the paper neatly, slipped it into my bag, and stood up. He raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" I met his gaze for half a second, then nodded. "That's it. No shouting, no threats, no scene, just silence." And yet that silence was heavier than anything I could have said. As I walked out of the conference room, I could feel every eye in the hallway turn toward me. People paused mid-conversation. Screensavers flickered on as keyboards went still. A few coworkers offered awkward, sympathetic smiles, the kind people give when they don't want to be caught caring too much. I swiped my badge at the security gate for the last time. The familiar beep echoed louder in my head than it ever had before. It was the sound of a door closing, for them, not for me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I was leaving behind and what they were about to lose. Gavin and the board thought they had ended something. In reality, they had started a countdown. It's funny how quiet moments can be the loudest in memory. No one in that building knew it yet, but my silence was not surrender. It was the trigger for a system they had ignored for years, a system that didn't care about titles or office politics. A system that only answered to one person, me. And with every step toward the elevator, I could almost feel the first domino tipping. What happened when I reached the street? Well, that's when things really started to move. People sometimes ask me why I stayed at Atlas Bank for so long. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the title. It was the belief, maybe naive, that doing the right thing still mattered in business. I remember my third year there. A senior executive suggested I adjust loan records for a high-profile client. He said it was harmless, just a few lines in the database, nobody will notice. But I noticed, and I refused. I knew that one small lie could spread like a crack through the whole foundation. He didn't speak to me for months after that. Years later, I uncovered a pattern of suspicious transactions, laundering money through shell accounts. I reported it. The investigation was quietly buried. I wasn't promoted that year. In fact, I was reassigned to a smaller project away from the core systems. I think they hoped I'd either quit or learn to play along. I didn't. Even when the choices hurt, I didn't bend. Not when they dangled opportunities. Not when they hinted that loyalty would be rewarded. My loyalty was to the integrity of the system, not to the people willing to twist it. That's why, over the years, I built the EIS, the Ethical Integrity System. At first, it was just a safeguard, something to prevent mistakes. But as time went on, it became more than that. It became a quiet guardian, and maybe a reflection of my own stubbornness. Most people in the company saw it as just another technical layer. They never bothered to understand how it really worked or why it was there. Gavin certainly didn't. He thought rules were flexible and principles were negotiable. But I knew better. And the thing about principles is they only reveal their real power when someone tries to break them. Gavin Holt had a way of filling a room without actually saying much. He dressed like every meeting was a photo shoot. Sharp suits, polished cufflinks, that practiced half smile that made him look confident and just a little untouchable. From the moment he became CEO, I could see the shift. Board meetings turned into performances. Reports became props. He spoke in buzzwords: innovation, disruption, synergy, but avoided the real technical conversations. I think he believed that as long as he could charm investors and appear in glossy magazine features, the details didn't matter. To him, systems were just tools, replaceable, disposable, and people like me, the ones who built those systems, were, in his words, legacy assets. I'll never forget the first time he called me that in front of the senior team. He smiled, as if it were a compliment. "Mara's one of our legacy assets," he said, "steady and reliable, like the old servers in the basement." The room chuckled politely. I didn't. The irony was Gavin never understood the EIS, Ethical Integrity System, even though it was documented in black and white. I'd sent him the overview twice. He never read it. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't think it was relevant. After all, why worry about a system designed to hold people accountable when you're the one in charge? What Gavin failed to grasp was that authority and control are not the same thing. He had the first, for now. The second, well, that belonged to whoever understood the architecture. I remember sitting across from him during a quarterly review. He was scrolling through his phone while I explained a system update. Halfway through my sentence, he waved me off. "I'm sure it's fine, Mara." "You've been doing this forever." He laughed, checked his watch, and moved the meeting on to the next shiny project. In that moment, I realized something important. Gavin didn't just underestimate me. He underestimated the very thing keeping the bank standing. And soon, he'd find out what that mistake would cost him. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the first alert went off. It started in the Chicago Operations Center, a quiet ping on the network monitor, nothing dramatic. The kind of thing most people would ignore on a Monday morning. But within seconds, that quiet ping multiplied. By 9:03, 2 branches in New York couldn't process wire transfers. At 9:04, the Los Angeles office lost access to the core banking dashboard. By 9:05, the help desk was swamped with tickets marked urgent in bright red. And at the center of every failure was the same cold message: access denied, EIS authentication required. I can picture the confusion in that control room. Techs trying the usual fixes, resetting sessions, rebooting servers, escalating to administrators. But nothing worked. The system wasn't frozen. It wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Somewhere around 9:07, Gavin must have gotten the first call. I imagine him in his glass office staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Maybe he thought it was a minor outage, something the IT team could patch in an hour. But by 9:10, the outage map looked like a spreading wildfire. Every major branch lit up in red. Credit card processing stalled. Mobile banking requests timed out. Even the internal messaging system started dropping connections. And still, the same message flashed on every admin console: authentication key not recognized. The truth was simple, painfully simple, but no one in that building wanted to say it out loud. At 9:02 a.m., the door to Atlas Bank's most critical systems had closed. And they no longer had the key. What happened over the next 15 minutes would take that quiet panic and turn it into something much, much louder. By 9:15 a.m., it was no longer a technical glitch. It was a story, and stories travel fast. The first customers to notice were the early risers, the ones trying to transfer rent money or pay suppliers before the business day began. Their apps froze mid-transaction, and when they tried again, the screen simply went blank. On the other side of the country, a cafe owner in Seattle swiped a corporate card for a bulk order of coffee beans. Declined. She tried again. Declined. The line of customers behind her began to shuffle impatiently. By 9:20, Twitter was a wall of complaints. Atlas Bank just ate my paycheck. Can't pay my mortgage. What's going on? Anyone else locked out of their account? Hashtag Atlas Bank down. The hashtag caught fire. Within minutes, news desks were calling branch managers trying to confirm the rumors. Reporters camped outside the Chicago headquarters, cameras ready, waiting for any sign of a statement. Inside, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to outright fear. The help desk phone lines rang non-stop. The branch managers were demanding answers. Investors were texting board members. And Gavin was pacing in front of the operations board, barking questions no one could answer. Why can't we bypass this? Who has the override? Silence. Then get whoever it is now. But no one could. The name tied to that override had been removed from the system hours earlier. Out on the street, customers were forming lines outside locked branch doors, their voices rising. The tension wasn't just inside Atlas Bank anymore. It was spilling out into the public, onto sidewalks, into the media. And as the noise grew louder, one thing became painfully clear. This was no longer a problem they could hide. What happened next would push Atlas Bank from public embarrassment into full-blown corporate crisis. It was just after 11 a.m. when my phone rang. The number on the screen wasn't one I recognized, but I knew exactly who it was. I let it ring twice before answering. Mara, this is Victor Crane, chairman of the board. His voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. We'd like to offer you your position back, effective immediately. Plus a compensation package, double your original pension. We just need you to restore the systems. There was a pause. Not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted him to feel the silence. Victor, I said, finally, you can't give me back something you've already taken away. He tried again. Look, Mara, mistakes were made. Let's not dwell on them. This is about moving forward. You're the only one who can fix this. I almost smiled. The only one who can fix this. That was the part they hadn't considered when they signed my termination papers. I explained calmly that the EIS, the Ethical Integrity System, had a built-in condition. It could only be overridden by a recognized active employee at the exact moment of authentication. That moment was 8:34 a.m. when they cut me out of the system. You can rehire me now, I said, but you can't rewind the clock. The system won't accept me as the same person I was at 8:34. It's not about titles. It's about trust and time. There was silence on the line. I imagined the boardroom Gavin's clenched jaw, Victor's hand tightening around the phone. This isn't revenge, I added. It's architecture. I could hear him inhale, ready to argue, but what came next wasn't negotiation. It was the sound of a man realizing the window had already closed. And outside that boardroom, the cost of their mistake was about to climb higher, much higher. By early afternoon, Atlas Bank's stock chart looked like a cliff. It had opened the day steady, but by 12:45 p.m., the slide was undeniable. 9%, then 14%, then a gut-wrenching 21% drop in less than 4 hours. On the trading floor, brokers' voices rose above the usual hum, a chorus of urgency. Pull out of Atlas now. Dump the position before it gets worse. Screens across the financial district flashed the same headline. Atlas Bank System outage, nationwide impact continues. Investors were panicking. Clients were furious. Competitors were circling. And in the middle of it all, Gavin was nowhere to be seen. The board had locked themselves in an emergency meeting, but no press statement came out. Every minute of silence from them was another $1 million bleeding away. I sat in my kitchen, coffee in hand, watching the live coverage. Cameras showed lines stretching around the block at multiple branches, customers pounding on glass doors, security guards shaking their heads. It wasn't just a technical failure anymore, it was a collapse of trust. By 1:30 p.m., trading in Atlas Bank shares was halted. In a single day, they'd wiped out over $4 billion in market value. Analysts on TV speculated about federal intervention. Some whispered the word insolvency. The irony was almost poetic. For years, Gavin had boasted that Atlas was too integrated to fail. But all it took was one locked system, one missing key, and the whole empire started to crumble. I knew this was only the beginning. The financial hit was bad, catastrophic even, but there was another blow coming, one they couldn't calculate on a balance sheet. And when it landed, they would finally understand just how expensive arrogance can be. The market crash was a wound. What came next was the twist of the knife. 2 days after the outage began, I sent a single email. It wasn't dramatic, no threats, no emotion, just a formal notification to Atlas Bank's legal department and a courtesy copy to the board. The subject line was simple: Intellectual Property Rights, EIS Platform. In the body, I reminded them of something they'd chosen to forget. The ethical integrity system was not and had never been owned by Atlas Bank. It was developed under a separate entity, my own LLC, back in 2015. The bank had a license to use it, yes, but that license included a very clear clause. Continued use required adherence to foundational ethical standards with respect to its creator. Firing me to avoid paying my pension wasn't just unethical. Under that clause, it was a direct violation. And in legal terms, that meant their license was terminated the moment my badge was deactivated. Translation: they weren't just locked out. They no longer had any legal right to access, modify, or even attempt to replicate the system. Every line of code, every safeguard, every encrypted process, all of it reverted fully to me. I can only imagine the chaos in that boardroom when their attorneys confirmed it. The outage wasn't a temporary inconvenience anymore. It was permanent, unless they could rebuild an entirely new infrastructure from scratch, something that would take months, maybe years, and hundreds of millions of dollars. Gavin had once joked that systems were just tools and that people like me were replaceable. Now he was learning that some tools can't be bought twice, and some people can't be replaced at all. But the legal blow wasn't the end. It was the spark for something even more devastating, and this time the damage wouldn't come from me. The first wave was the customers. Within 48 hours of the legal notice, high net worth clients began pulling their accounts. Not quietly either. Wire transfers in the tens of millions went to competing institutions. By the end of the week, nearly half of Atlas Bank's premier clients were gone. The second wave came from corporate partners, payment processors, mortgage brokers, even insurance affiliates. They all started suspending agreements. Publicly, they blamed operational instability. Privately, they admitted what everyone else was starting to see. Atlas wasn't just in trouble. Atlas was sinking. And then came the third wave, the one Gavin couldn't spin away with a press release. It was their own people. Senior managers, risk analysts, tech leads, some of the most loyal employees started resigning. A few jumped ship to competitors. Others simply walked away, unwilling to tie their reputations to what Atlas had become. I heard about it all from the outside, sipping coffee at my kitchen table, scrolling through news feeds. Every headline carried a new number, a new name, a new blow. Atlas wasn't just losing money, they were losing the confidence of everyone who mattered. On TV, a panel of analysts debated whether the bank could survive. One of them said something that made me pause. When trust evaporates, the collapse isn't linear, it's exponential. He was right. Trust was the currency Atlas could never replenish. And once it was gone, the rest followed faster than even I expected. By the end of the month, the name Atlas Bank was less a financial brand and more a cautionary tale. But for Gavin and the board, there was still one more hit coming, and this one was personal. After weeks of noise, my world finally went quiet. No more urgent calls, no more headlines, no more watching stock charts collapse in real time. I had traded the echo of boardrooms for the soft hum of a kettle on my kitchen stove. Most mornings now started the same way. Coffee in hand, sitting by the window of my little house near Lake Geneva in Wisconsin. Out there, the water didn't care about corporate meltdowns. The trees didn't know my name. And the wind had a way of carrying away whatever weight was left on my shoulders. I planted herbs along the fence: rosemary, basil, thyme. My hands, which had spent decades typing commands and signing compliance reports, were now digging into the soil. There was something grounding about it, something honest. Sometimes an email would slip into my inbox, a junior engineer from another company asking about EIS, a student wanting advice on building ethical systems. I always answered, not because I needed to, but because those conversations reminded me why I built it in the first place. I never mentioned Gavin, never mentioned Atlas by name. I didn't need to. The story was already out there, told and retold in ways I couldn't control. One afternoon, as I was trimming the rosemary, I thought about the day they handed me that letter. How in that moment, they thought they had taken everything from me. But sitting there with the scent of fresh herbs in the air and the lake glinting in the sun, I realized they had given me something else entirely: time. And with time comes perspective. I knew there was one last thing I wanted to share, not with them, but with anyone willing to listen. Because the real ending to this story wasn't about a bank at all. Atlas Bank never recovered. Within a year, they were absorbed by a competitor. Gavin resigned before the deal closed, citing personal reasons. The board members scattered into other industries, carrying titles that looked impressive on paper, but with reputations that would never quite be the same. As for me, I didn't go back to the corporate world. I didn't need to. I started consulting on my own terms with companies that actually wanted to build systems that protected people, not just profits. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about doing the work in a way I could live with. Looking back, the moment they handed me that termination letter was the moment I got my freedom back. They thought they were taking something from me: my position, my influence, my future. What they didn't realize was that the value of all those things depended on my willingness to compromise, and I never did. The ethical integrity system was just code on a server to them, but to me, it was a reflection of every decision I'd made to stand my ground. When they broke that trust, the system simply mirrored it back. No anger, no revenge, just cause and effect. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: power built on fear or greed is fragile. Power built on trust, real trust, can outlast anything. And once you give that trust away, you can't demand it back. So no, I didn't win in the way people expect. I didn't walk away with some dramatic payout or a headline-grabbing settlement. What I walked away with was better, my principles intact, and the knowledge that I had never sold them for convenience. What about you? If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed silent, or would you have taken the deal?